Hi, I'm French Caldwell. I'm here to talk to you about my case study of public comments to draft regulatory guidance for social media risk management and financial services institutions. Now, you may ask why I chose this as my pilot study. Well, my overall research is around the impact of emerging technologies on how public policy is made. I thought this would be a good place to start. And this pilot study in particular was evaluating the use of case study as an approach and document review as a method with the objective of identifying barriers to improving regulatory guidance on social media that's used by financial services organizations. Now, financial services firms are faced with regulations that inhibit their effective use of social media, things that require them to get approval on any advertising. And by the way, a tweet is an advertisement. And then there's things like required disclosures. How do you put a big mandatory disclosure in a tweet or on Facebook? And then there are limits on monitoring of employees to make sure that they're using social media appropriately. All of these make the use of social media very difficult within the financial services industry. Well, the regulators know about this. They understand that social media was not accounted for in the regulations that banks and credit unions and other financial institutions have to abide by. And so this group of regulators, these 5 regulators that all belong to what is called the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council, proposed some new guidance on the use of social media back in January. They put it out for public comment, and there were 81 public comments that were posted. There's no final guidance yet. Now, when I went and took a look at the public comments, after some trial and error, I came up with themes for evaluating these comments, these themes being cost and complexity. Now, there's no quantitative analysis here, and in fact, none of the commenters provided any quantitative analysis around cost and complexity. So what I did here is took a look at what their perceptions of cost and complexity were. I used some discourse analysis when I reviewed these documents to see for cost, what is the time and expense needed to comply? What are their perceptions around time and expense, as well as any technology investments? How do they perceive the need for those? And then for complexity, I looked at their perceptions on the breadth of the proposed guidance, the feasibility of compliance, and potential conflicts with existing laws, rules, and regulatory guidance. Now, when I looked at cost, I said, well, how do I code this? Well, I coded this in terms of the effects, and I looked at whether the effects were either beneficial or were they harmful. So beneficial, would a statement of benefit would to the responder's organization or the responder's industry or the responder's customers would be considered beneficial. A statement of cost, increased effort, or harm to the responder's organization or industry or customers would be considered harmful. For complexity, I said, well, I'm going to code that looking for impediments in the perception of impediments by the responders. And I looked to see, did they have a constructive perception? And by constructive, did they provide suggestions on how to make the guidance work? Or were they resistant? Did they identify barriers that made the guidance problematic, maybe even throwing out some red herrings? Now, the results, well, I looked at 3 individual commenters, just citizens commenting. I looked at 3 financial services institutions, a bank holding company, a community bank, and a credit union. And I looked at 3 trade associations that had commented. One was the Financial Services Roundtable's technology arm called BITS. Another was represented securities firms, and another represented credit unions. Now, after looking at all of this analysis, um, cost was expressed by the commenters in terms of the time and expense that would be needed to comply and the technology investments, as I said before. Complexity was expressed as the breadth of the proposed guidance, with concerns that it attempts to offer a broad-brushed overlay on existing regulations without actually modifying those underlying regulations to account for the impact of social media. So examples of complexity include having to comply with proposed guidance as well as existing social media guidance from other regulators like the SEC, which could conflict. And then there was a question of the legality of monitoring employees' personal use of social media and concerns with respect to ensuring customer privacy and challenges with the means of presenting mandatory disclosures to customers within the technical limits of social media. Overall, I found, that the case study and document review were appropriate and productive for this type of research. If I had to do it all over again, and I had more time, I'd like to interview the regulators. Frankly, I tried to give a couple of them a call and got no answers, no response to my voicemails. So maybe I could just take a look at sections of the proposed guidance where they announce their intent. And then I'd like to use a more scientific method of selecting the subset of public comments for review, and perhaps add a fourth category of institutions, that being interest groups other than trade associations, those representing perhaps consumers and so on. Well, thank you. If you would like to have any more information, you can contact me here. I'd appreciate your inputs on where you think this research should go next. And if you're working on similar research, I'd certainly like to hear from you. Okay.